What if Bran the Builder sealed a secret beneath Winterfell that the three-eyed raven was never meant to find? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. The road from King's Landing to Winterfell takes 3 weeks when the weather holds. It holds. Bran Stark, King of the Six Kingdoms, arrives at the gates of his ancestral home on a grey afternoon in late autumn, his chair carried from the wheelhouse by 2 of his guard, his breath clouding faintly in the cold air. The castle looks different to him each time he returns. The East Tower is fully rebuilt now. The new stone is brighter than the old, and it stands out against the weathered grey of the original walls like a scar that has not yet settled into skin. Sansa meets him in the yard. She has the North in her face, the same pale composure their mother carried, the same careful eyes. She is queen in the North, and she wears it without seeming to try. They embrace, briefly, in the way of people who have been through too much together to make ceremonies of small moments. 3 months, she says. 3 months, he agrees. They walk together through the inner yard while his guard sees to the horses and the wheelhouse. Sansa tells him about the progress on the south wall, the grain stores, the dispute between 2 lesser lords over grazing rights near the Barrowlands. She tells him it without complaint. It is the machinery of governance, and she has made herself good at it. Bran listens and nods and asks the right questions, and all the while some part of him is turned slightly elsewhere, like a man in a room who hears a sound in the wall that no one else seems to notice. He does not say anything about it yet. He is not sure what it is. That night the Godswood is still. The heart tree stands pale and wide in the darkness, its carved face bleeding faint red sap down the pale bark, the long features frozen in whatever expression Bran the Builder's people gave it 8,000 years ago. Bran sits before it in his chair. His guard waits at the Godswood gate with instructions not to disturb him. He does not intend to go under. He means only to listen. But the weirwood pulls at him the way it always does when something has been waiting, and soon enough his eyes go white, and the Godswood falls away. What he sees is not clear. It rarely is when something reaches for him rather than the other way around. He catches fragments, stone passages, torchlight or something older than torchlight, a door that is not the door to the family crypts, but something deeper, set into rock that feels like the root of the world. There is a figure moving through the passage. Old garb, rough-spun, a cloak that means nothing and everything. The figure carries something wrapped in cloth and moves with the deliberate care of a man who knows the weight of what he holds. He reaches the door. He presses his palm to the stone. There is blood on the stone where his hand was. The door seals. Then the vision fragments, and Bran comes back into his body with a hard breath, the cold of the Godswood pressing in from all sides. He sits there for a long time without moving. Meera Reed finds him an hour later, still in front of the heart tree. She has been his companion and guardian at Winterfell since the long night, one of the few who stayed when the celebrations ended and the great lords went back to their halls. She is practical in the way that people become practical after years in the wilderness, and she reads his face the way she has learned to read it over that time. "You went under," she says. It is not a question. "Something called me," Bran says. She crouches beside his chair so they are level. "What did you see?" he tells her. The passage, the door, the figure and the blood. When he finishes, she is quiet for a moment, turning it over. "Could be old memory," she says carefully. "The weirwoods hold everything. It doesn't mean it's something you're supposed to act on." "The vision reached for me," Bran says. "I wasn't looking. The tree pushed it at me." He looks at the heart tree. "Something has changed. Something down there has woken up, or it knows I'm back." Meera lets out a slow breath. She looks at the heart tree too, and her expression is the expression of someone who has watched a boy become something other than a boy and has learned not to argue with what that something tells him. "Then we should be careful about how we move," she says. "If it's been sealed 8,000 years, another day won't change anything." "No," Bran says, "but I don't want to wait." They go the next morning, before the castle is fully awake. Meera and Bran and 1 Stark guard, a quiet Northman named Cotter, who has served Sansa's household since before the war and who says very little and asks fewer questions. They take torches from the sconce near the crypt entrance and descend. The upper crypts are familiar. Bran has been brought here before, as a boy, before everything changed. The iron statues of the dead kings sit in their alcoves in the torchlight, stone-faced, swords across their laps, watching the passage with the patience of 8,000 years. Ned Stark is here now, near the entrance where he belongs. Bran does not look at his father's effigy long. They go deeper, past the oldest statues, where the stonework is rougher and the faces harder to read, where the torchlight starts to feel thin in the dark. The passage narrows. The air changes. It is not cold the way the upper crypts are cold. It is still, a different kind of still, the stillness of air that has not moved in a very long time. And then the passage ends. Or it should end. But there is a section of the wall to the left that the torchlight catches differently, a subtle difference in the grain of the stone, a seam that runs floor to ceiling where the rock does not quite match. Bran brings his torch close. Carved into the stone, nearly worn smooth by ages, are marks he recognizes. He has seen them in his greenseer visions. Weirwood patterns, the curling knotwork that the children of the forest used in the oldest times. Runes in the old tongue pressed in beneath them, faint as old scars. Cotter holds his torch up and looks at the wall. "Never seen this passage before," he says, and that is all he says. Mira runs her fingers along the seam, feeling the edge of it. She looks at Bran. "You were right," she says quietly. Bran stares at the marks on the stone. He does not need the weirwood net to know that the figure from his vision stood in this exact spot 8,000 years ago with something wrapped in cloth and sealed whatever lies beyond this wall with his own blood. The children's marks are not decoration. They are a lock. And the fact that the weirwood pushed the vision at him now, after 3 months away, tells him something he is not sure he wants to know. Whatever is behind this door knows the three-eyed raven has come home. Mira's fingers trace the seam again, slower this time. The torchlight catches the carved knotwork at an angle that makes the patterns seem almost to move, the weirwood spirals curling in on themselves like something breathing. "Don't touch the runes," Bran says. She pulls her hand back. Cotter stands behind them both, torch raised, saying nothing. His face in the orange light is the face of a man who has decided this is not his business to understand, only his duty to witness. Bran wheels himself as close to the door as the passage allows. He studies the runes. Some of the old tongue he has learned through the weirwood net, a slow accretion of dead memory over months and years. Not all of it. Enough to know what some of these say and enough to recognize the shapes of what he does not. The children's sigils he knows better. They left their marks on the weirwoods the way men leave marks on gravestones. He has seen these particular sigils before, in a vision he never sought. A vision of a night before recorded history, when the first pact was being made and neither side trusted the other enough to make it without witnesses who could never speak. He reaches out and presses his palm flat against the stone. The vision hits him like stepping off a ledge. He is not in the crypts anymore. He is everywhere the weirwoods have ever been, all at once. 1,000 years of root and rock pressing up through the vision like a wave, and beneath it all, something that is not his own voice is screaming. Not screaming in fear, screaming in grief. He sees the children, small, large-eyed, bark-skinned, moving in the torchless dark of a world before torches, and they are carrying something between them, with the care of people carrying something they cannot put down and cannot bear to hold. The knowledge moves through the vision like smoke. It pours through him. He catches pieces, the ritual, the dragonglass, the tree, the man on the altar. Not a monster yet. The moment the thing they made turned and looked back at its makers, and the children understood what they had done. And then the door. This door being sealed from the inside while one of them stayed behind to make sure it would never open except by the right hands. Bran's hand tears away from the stone. He is gasping. He doesn't know when that started. Mira has both her hands on his shoulders and her face is close to his, searching. "Bran, look at me." He looks at her. His chest steadies. "What happened?" she asks. "The children made them," he says. His voice sounds strange in the still air. "The White Walkers. The children made them, and then they sealed what they knew down here because they couldn't destroy it. The knowledge of how it was done, and something else, something they found out too late to use." He looks back at the door. A weapon, or the knowledge of one. Mira stares at him. Behind her, Cotter has gone very still. "The door opens to greenseer blood," Bran says. He reaches to the scabbard at his belt. One of his guard carries a short blade there in case Bran needs it, and closes his fingers around the handle. "No," Mira says immediately. "It's the only way." "You don't know that. You had a vision, Bran, not a set of instructions." "I know what I saw." He meets her eyes. The figure in last night's vision pressed his hand to the seal with blood already on it. Bran the Builder's blood. The door was built to answer to his line. Mira looks at him for a long moment. She is not a woman who frightens easily. She tracked him across the frozen north with a crippled boy and a dead boy, and nothing but stubbornness between her and the end. But her jaw is tight. "Small cut," she says finally. He draws the blade across the heel of his palm, quick, before she can say anything else. The blood comes up dark in the torchlight. He presses his palm to the center of the seam, over the largest of the children's sigils, and holds it there. For a moment, nothing. Then the stone under his hand goes cold, colder than it already was, colder than the crypt air, a cold that has nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with age. The runes begin to show faint light at their edges, not the blue of the Night King, blue of the night, something older than that and quieter, the color of light through ice that has never melted. The seam cracks open from top to bottom with a sound like a tree splitting in a storm, deep and slow and final. The door swings inward. The chamber beyond is circular, perhaps 20 feet across. Its walls are covered in something that glows from within, pale red and white, the colors of a weirwood, pulsing faintly like the light is breathing. When Bran brings his torch inside, he can see the growth is fungal, or something like fungal, threaded through the stone in pale veins that have had 8,000 years to spread. The air that comes out of the chamber is cold and clean and has the faint smell of the godswood on it. It has not moved since before the Age of Heroes. Against the far wall stands a stone table. Carved into its surface is a map, and even in the low light, Bran can trace the shapes: Westeros, Essos, markings he does not recognize at first and then begins to. Locations, significant ones. Some he knows from Greenseer visions, some he does not. At the center of the table lies an object wrapped in cloth, the wrapping so old that its original color is impossible to guess. Beside it, taking up the right half of the table, is a tablet of carved weirwood. The wood is pale and hard as stone, preserved by the sealed air, covered top to bottom in small, careful markings that run in 2 columns. Bran wheels to the table and brings his torch close to the tablet. Old tongue in the left column, common speech in the right, written in a hand that is older than any common speech Bran has ever seen transcribed. The letters slightly wrong in ways that show a language still settling into its shapes. He reads. He reads slowly, his lips moving, and Mira stands beside him and holds her torch steady over his shoulder without being asked. The pact is laid out plainly. Bran the Builder came to the children in the years after the Long Night, when the White Walkers had been driven back but not destroyed, and the world was trying to understand what had just happened. The children told him the truth. They told him what they had made and why, and that they did not know how to unmake it. They told him there was a weakness in the Walkers' magic that they had discovered during the Long Night itself, when the Walkers were already upon them, too late to exploit. They had no time. They had no weapons suited to it, but the knowledge was too dangerous to carry freely in the world and too important to destroy, so they made a pact. Bran the Builder would build Winterfell over this chamber, a fortress to stand as long as the wall stood, a place where the secret could survive the centuries under the protection of a Stark bloodline. The children would seal the chamber with their own magic, and the knowledge, the full account of the creation, the weakness, and the object they had prepared to exploit it, would wait for the day it was needed again. Bran stops reading. He looks at the wrapped object at the center of the table. The text calls it the last gift. He looks at Mira. She has read enough over his shoulder to know what he knows. Her face in the weirwood light is pale and careful and older than she usually looks. They knew it would come back, she says quietly. The children knew the Long Night wasn't finished. Bran does not answer immediately. He looks at the wrapped object, at the tablet, at the map carved into the stone table with its markings he does not yet fully understand. They sealed this away 8,000 years ago, he says, and the weirwood called me here 3 months into my first absence. He looks at the heart tree sigil carved above the chamber's door. Something has changed, or something is about to. Mira looks at the wrapped cloth in the center of the table. Are you going to open it? Not yet, Bran says. Not without Sansa. Cotter carries the torch back up the passage without being asked. He has understood, from the moment the door opened, that this is not a thing soldiers discuss in the yard. Bran watches the firelight move ahead of them and thinks about the tablet's careful double column. the common speech letters, slightly wrong in their old shapes, and the patience of whatever child of the forest sat in this chamber and translated their own shame into a language they hoped would survive them. They seal the door behind them. Or rather, it seals itself. The moment Bran's hand leaves the stone, the seam closes with the same slow finality it opened with, the light dying from the runes like an ember going cold. Whatever mechanism Bran the Builder built into this lock, it is more thorough than iron. Sansa is in her solar when they find her, a stack of correspondence on the table before her and a cup of tea gone cold at her elbow. She looks up when they come in, reads their faces, and sets down her quill. Meera closes the door. Bran tells her everything, the vision in the godswood, the passage, the seam, the runes, the way the stone answered his blood. He tells her what the tablet said, word by word as best he can recall, though the oldest common speech is not easy to render in plain telling. Meera adds details where his account moves too quickly. Sansa listens without interrupting, her hands folded on the table, her face doing the thing it does in council when she is gathering rather than reacting. When he finishes, the solar is quiet. "And you haven't touched the wrapped object," Sansa says. "No." She looks at Meera. "You agreed with that." "I agreed you should be here before we did," Meera says. "Whatever it is, the tablet calls it the last gift, and the tablet says it was forged to be used against the Night King. If the children thought it important enough to build a sealed chamber and draft a pact with Bran the Builder over it, then it matters who is in the room when it opens." Sansa is quiet for another moment. Outside the solar window, the yard sounds carry up, someone calling to someone else about lumber, the rhythmic knock of a hammer on the new east wall, the ordinary world doing its ordinary work. "Who else knows?" she asks. "Cotter," Bran says. Sansa nods slowly. She trusts Cotter the way she trusts her household guard, which is to say she has thought about it carefully and decided to. "All right," she says. "We go back down." The four of them descend together. Sansa carries her own torch. She does not ask to be helped through the narrow lower passage, and no one offers. When they reach the sealed wall, she looks at the knotwork for a long time, her torch held close to the stone, her eyes moving across the carved sigils with the expression of someone reading a letter they cannot quite parse. "Open it," she says. Bran presses his cut palm to the seam again. The wound has mostly closed, but enough blood rises that the runes answer. The door swings inward. The cold, clean godswood air moves past them, and Sansa goes still for a moment, just breathing it. Then she walks inside. She takes the chamber in the way she takes most things, steadily, starting at the edges and moving to the center. She looks at the walls, the pale red and white veins pulsing faintly through the stone. She looks at the map carved into the table's surface and leans close without touching it, following the markings with her eyes. She reads the tablet. She reads it twice. Then she looks at the wrapped object. It is smaller than Bran expected when he first saw it, a short length, cloth-wrapped, sitting in a shallow groove carved into the table that is clearly designed to hold it. The wrapping has gone the color of old bone. "The tablet says only a Stark can read the blade's inscription," Bran says. "It doesn't say only a Stark can touch it." Sansa looks at him. "Is that what it says, or is that what you want it to say?" "A beat. Both," he admits. She looks back at the object. Then she reaches out and begins to unwrap it, fingers careful and steady, peeling back the layers of cloth that have not been disturbed in 8,000 years. The fabric does not crumble. Whatever the children worked into the seal of this room, it has kept the air inside it so still and cold that nothing has decayed. The cloth simply falls away. The blade underneath is short, longer than a dagger, shorter than a short sword, the proportions somewhere between the two. What it is made of is not immediately clear. It is pale, almost white, with a faint luminescence to it that owes nothing to the torches. Veins of amber run through the metal in thin threads, and those veins are not still. They move, slowly, the way sap moves in a tree, weirwood sap. The blade is weirwood, and something else worked together, fused at some heat or by some method that left no seam between them. Sansa holds it flat across both palms and looks at the inscription along the flat of the blade. "Old tongue," she says. "I can read it," Bran says. She brings it to him. He looks at the inscription, sounding the old letters, the way the weirwood net has taught him to. The words come slowly. He reads them once to himself, and then says them aloud. Breaker of the oath that should not have been made. The chamber holds the words for a moment. Mira looks at the blade. Whose oath? Bran reaches out and takes the blade from Sansa's hands. He is not sure why. The moment his fingers close around the grip, the vision does not so much arrive as open around him, the way a door opens that was already slightly ajar. He sees the children at their ritual. He has seen pieces of this before in other visions, but never this clearly and never from this angle. The man on the stone altar is already bound. He knows what is coming. His eyes are open, and what is in them is not fear, but a kind of terrible understanding, and that is worse. The dragon glass enters him. The weirwood magic moves through the children like a song sung in a key that was never meant for living throats. The man's eyes change. And then, years later, the same children, or their children, crouched in a circle around a second altar. On this altar is the blade. They are making it by the same methods. Dragon glass, weirwood, something that costs them, the kind of magic that leaves a mark. One of the children sets her hand on the finished blade and dies from the effort of the final working. Bran watches her fold and does not look away. The vision shows him the rest quickly, the way the weirwood sometimes shows the end of a story when the middle is too long to hold in a single breath. The children finished the blade. They sent word to the first Night King to meet them, to parley, and the Night King came, and they did not use the blade because they could not get close enough, and they understood in that moment that they would never be able to. The oath that made him was also what would let him sense the weapon before they could bring it near. The breaker required a different hand, a human hand, a hand that stood outside the oath. Bran comes back to the chamber. He is still holding the blade. His knuckles have gone pale around the grip. Sansa is watching him. She has learned, over the years, to read the way he returns from a vision by how long it takes his eyes to focus. This one was long. Tell us, she says quietly. The children made the Night King, he says. It is not new information. The tablet confirmed it, and he already knew it from other visions, but saying it in this chamber, holding this blade, makes it land differently. And then they made this to unmake him. But they couldn't use it themselves. They made him with their own blood and their own oath, and he could sense it in them. This weapon required a human hand. He looks at the blade. It required Bran the Builder, and he died before the Night King came back. The weirwood light breathes on the walls. And now the Night King is dead, Mira says. Yes, Bran says. He does not say what the children's vision showed him at the end, the thing they believed that made them keep the blade rather than discard it. That what was made once by oath and blood and dragon glass does not simply stop existing because one vessel is destroyed. He sets the blade carefully back in its groove in the table. We need to understand what the map is showing us, he says, before we tell anyone else. Sansa looks at him. Jon. Not yet. She holds his gaze for a moment, then she nods. They wrap the blade in Sansa's own cloak before they leave the chamber. It is the only cloth any of them have that is not already filthy from the crypt passage, and the pale metal with its moving amber veins is not a thing that should be visible to anyone they pass in the yard. Sansa does not comment on giving up the cloak. She simply unclasps it, wraps the blade with the same careful hands she used to unwrap it, and hands the bundle to Bran to lay across his lap. Cotter leads them back up through the dark. He has asked no questions since the door opened, and he asks none now. When they emerge into the upper crypts and the torchlight steadies and the familiar cold settles around them again, he moves ahead to check the passage to the stairs without being told. Some men are useful because of what they know. Cotter is useful because of what he has decided not to ask. By the time they reach Sansa's private chambers, she has already made her decisions. She calls for Lyanna Mormont before she has taken off her gloves. Lyanna arrives within the hour. She is 15, and she does not knock. Sansa has arranged them around the smaller council table, not the great hall, herself, Bran, Mira, and now Lyanna, who takes in the room and its occupants with the quick assessment of someone who has been taking stock of rooms since before she had any power to change what she found in them. She sits. She waits. Sansa lays a letter on the table beside the wrapped blade. It arrived from King's Landing 2 days before Bran returned to Winterfell, written in Tyrion's hand, which is small and precise and covers the parchment in a way that suggests he drafted it more than once. She has read it 4 times. She reads it aloud now. Tyrion writes that the small council is fragile in ways that do not show from the outside. The great houses are watching Bran's kingship with the polite attention of men who have not yet decided whether to test it. The faith is quieter than it was, and all the more watchful for that. There are whispers, he does not say from whom, that the wall's purpose is finished, and the garrisons are a waste of men and provisions the realm can no longer afford. He writes that the long night's ending has not brought peace so much as exhaustion dressed up as peace, and that exhaustion is not a foundation anyone should build policy on. His counsel in the letter, laid out plainly in that careful hand, is that anything which threatens the idea of permanent victory over the others should be held very close, very quietly, until there is something definite to be done about it. He ends the letter with a line that Sansa reads without inflection. If word spreads that the long night has merely paused, the realm will not wait for guidance. It will act, and act badly, and what fragile thing they have built will come apart before anyone can stop it. Lyanna listens to all of it. When Sansa finishes, Lyanna looks at the wrapped blade on the table. So we do nothing, she says. That's his counsel. His counsel is patience, Sansa says. Those are different things. Lyanna's jaw sets. She is young enough that the set of it is still more stubbornness than calculation, and old enough to know the difference matters. She does not push it further, but her silence is not agreement. Mira speaks next. She talks about the blade the way she talks about most things, plainly, without urgency, with the particular steadiness of someone who learned a long time ago that panic is not useful. The inscription names its purpose, the visions show its origin, but neither the tablet nor Bran's visions have yet told them the conditions under which the blade functions, who must wield it, or what using it costs. The children who made it were specific enough to inscribe a name and seal the chamber with a pact. They were not careless people. If they sealed the conditions for use inside the same chamber, and Bran has not yet read them clearly, it means either those conditions are elsewhere on the map, or they are encoded in the visions the blade itself is giving him, and he has not yet had enough of them to understand the full text. Moving the blade without knowing those conditions is not preparation. It is improvisation with a weapon built by people who understood more about the other's nature than anyone alive. Lyanna watches her through this. Her expression does not change much, but the stubbornness in it shifts slightly towards something that is listening. Bran sets his hand on the table. "We need Jon," he says. Sansa looks at him. "He faced them directly," Bran says. "He made every major decision against the Night King from a position of partial knowledge, and he was right more often than anyone had a right to expect. He knows things about the way the others move and press and withdraw that I only have from the Weirwood memory. That is not the same as having stood in front of them." He pauses. "And he is a Stark. What the tablet says about the blade and about the pact, it matters who is in the room." The fire moves in the grate. Outside, the hammer has stopped. Evening is coming on, and the yard is quieting. Sansa agrees. She does not like it. Bran can see that clearly. The small tightening around her eyes that means she is weighing something she has already decided against. But she agrees. The terms she sets are a small party. Trusted riders, no great procession north that draws questions. A raven goes first with a coded message. Bran follows within a fortnight. Lyanna looks between them when this is settled. She wants to ask about the blade and whether Bear Island fortifies in the meantime, and Sansa tells her yes, quietly and without making it a declaration. And Lyanna accepts that with the brisk nod of someone who already had the orders half-drafted in her head. That night, the blade is locked in Sansa's own chest, the only lock in Winterfell that Sansa keeps the key to herself. Bran does not sleep. He wheels himself to the Godswood in the dark, past the guards who know better than to follow him in, and sits before the heart tree. The face carved into the pale bark looks the way it always looks, sorrowing, patient, old in a way that makes the castle around it seem new. The red sap runs in the grooves of its eyes like tears that have been falling for 8,000 years. He lays his hands on the roots and closes his eyes. The weirwood takes him down slowly this time, not the sudden plunge of the blade's vision, but a long descent, the way a stone sinks through dark water. He passes through layers of memory. He sees the north as it was before the wall, before Winterfell, a landscape without names, managed only by seasons and the things that moved through them. He sees the children before the pact, small figures carrying light through forests that are not forests anymore. And then he is in the ancient war. The one before the Long Night was called the Long Night because there was no one left who remembered warmth well enough to name the absence of it. The children fight. They fight with roots and fire and the kind of magic that costs the person using it something they do not get back. The walkers do not fight. They advance. That is the thing the visions keep showing him, the thing his mind keeps snagging on. The others do not charge or rage or press in fury the way men do. They move the way winter moves, without hurry, because winter has never needed to hurry. Every defense the children raise, the walkers study. Every weakness they find, they remember. The dragon glass breaks them, the fire drives them, but neither destroys what made them. And what made them cannot be unmade by force alone, because force was never the mechanism of the making. The vision shows him the first Night King at the moment of the binding, and then again years later, when the children understood what the binding had done. They had made something that would always return. Not the same vessel, perhaps not the same face, but the same oath living in a new form the way a fire lives in new wood. Arya's blade took the vessel. The vision does not tell him, in words, that the oath still lives somewhere in the world looking for a new one. It does not need to. Bran comes back to the Godswood with his hands cold on the roots and his breath making slow clouds in the dark air. The heart tree watches him. He stares back at it for a long time. When he finally wheels himself back inside, the castle is fully quiet, and the fire in his chamber has burned down to coals. He sits beside it in the dark, and does not reach for more wood. He thinks about the tablet's careful translation, the common speech letters, slightly wrong in their old shapes, the patience of whoever wrote it down. He thinks about Tyrion's letter, and Lyanna's jaw, and Sansa's small, careful tightening around the eyes. He thinks about Jon, somewhere beyond the wall, riding through a world he believes is finally safe. The raven goes north in the morning. The raven goes north in the morning, and Bran follows it within the fortnight. The party is small by design. Bran, Meera, and two of Sansa's most trusted household guards, men who rode through the long night and came out the other side with the kind of silence that only comes from having seen enough. They move quickly. Bran's chair is traded for a litter between two horses, the same arrangement he has used on every northern journey, and Meera rides alongside him and says little. The wrapped blade stays behind, locked in Sansa's chest. What they carry north is only knowledge, which is heavier and harder to set down. Castle Black is a shell. Bran has not been back since the long night, and the sight of it stops him for a moment, the towers still standing, barely, the courtyard swept clean of the dead, but carrying the particular emptiness of a place that has been grief-tended rather than lived in. A skeleton garrison of 14 men holds it. Their commander, a weathered ranger named Sir Willem Dustin, meets them at the gate, reads the letter with Sansa's seal, and opens the great iron lift without ceremony. They go up through the wall in silence. The wind above it is savage and flat and smells like nothing, like the absence of everything that has a smell. When they come out on the north side, the world below stretches into white and gray and the suggestion of tree lines that the failing light makes uncertain. Meera pulls her hood up and looks north. She has been here before. Her face shows nothing. They find Jon's camp 2 days beyond the wall. It is not much to look at, a cluster of low shelters built from stripped wood and packed snow, a fire pit producing thin smoke, half a dozen free folk scouts moving around the perimeter with the unhurried wariness of people for whom alertness is not a posture but a habit. Tormund is sitting on a log, eating something that does not bear close inspection. He sees Bran's litter from 40 yards out and stands up. "Little Crow," he calls, which is not what he calls Jon. Jon emerges from the largest shelter pulling on a glove and stops when he sees them. He looks older than the last time Bran saw him. That is not the right word. Jon has looked old since he was 15, but there is a settled quality to him now that was not there before, something that has stopped fighting itself. He looks at Bran, then at Meera, then at the guards, and his gray eyes do the quick accounting that they always do. "What's wrong?" he says. It is not a question. Bran tells him inside the shelter, away from the scouts, with Tormund leaning against the far wall because Jon will not ask him to leave, and Tormund will not go without being asked. Bran lays it out the same way he laid it out for Sansa. The vision, the passage, the door, the tablet, the blade. He tells Jon what the inscription says. He tells him what the children built it to do and why they could not use it themselves. He watches Jon's face through all of it, and Jon's face does what it does when Jon is thinking. It goes still. Not blank, but inward, the way a man looks when he is holding something in his hands and judging its weight. When Bran finishes, Jon is quiet for a moment. "Show me," he says. "The blade." "It's at Winterfell." Jon nods slowly. He had expected that. He looks at Mira. "You've seen it." "I've held it," she says. Tormund has been quiet through Bran's telling, which is unusual enough to be its own kind of signal. He speaks now from the wall, his voice lower than his normal register. "We have songs," he says. "Old ones. The kind the grandmothers sing when they think the children are sleeping." He pauses. "They speak of a Thawbringer, someone who came between the cold and the world when the world had given up. And there's a line in the songs, I heard it from 3 different tribes, different words, same meaning, about a weapon that breaks the oath." Jon looks at him. "What oath?" Tormund opens his hands. "The songs don't agree on that. One version says it is the Night King's oath to Winter. Another says it is Winter's oath to the Night King. Another says it belongs to whoever made him." He pauses again. "They're old songs. They've been walked across a lot of winters. Things get lost." Jon presses him on it, patient and careful, asking about the tribes and which versions he trusts and whether the shamans have longer texts. Tormund does his best. The knowledge is fragmentary, seams showing where pieces have been lost, edges that do not quite meet. But the word for breaking the oath appears in all 3 versions, and that is not nothing. In the end, Jon agrees to return with them to Winterfell. He sends a scout ahead to inform the camp's second that he will be south for a time. He calls Ghost. The direwolf comes from behind the shelter and takes in the group with his red eyes. He goes to Jon's side without hesitation and stands there while Jon pulls on his cloak. Then Bran reaches into his pack for the dispatch case, just to show Jon the sealed letter from Sansa, and Ghost goes rigid. Every hair on him rises. He backs 2 steps away and does not come forward again. There is nothing in the case. No blade, no artifact. Only parchment. Jon watches his wolf. "He smells something," he says quietly. "He smells what we carried," Mira says. "The blade was never in that case. He's smelling what came off me when I held it." Ghost stays 10 feet back for the rest of the evening. He does not growl. He simply refuses to be closer, and that refusal is more unsettling than growling would have been. Tormund insists on sending shamans. He produces them from the camp the following morning, 2 of them, an old woman and a younger man who might be her grandson or might simply be her student. He explains that they read the children's work in ways no southern Meister can, that the old woman has spent her life tracking the places in the far north where the children's workings still mark the land. Jon looks at the old woman for a moment, then looks at Bran, and Bran nods. They leave with the dawn. The old woman rides beside Bran's litter for much of the second day south. She does not ask to see what they are carrying or where it is. She already knows they are not carrying it. What she wants to talk about is the tablet, and Bran describes it to her the way he has described it to everyone. The double column, the old tongue, and the common speech. The careful translated shame of whoever set it down. She listens with her eyes on the middle distance. "The blade remembers the oath," she says finally, in the accented common speech that comes from learning a language from traders rather than tutors. "That is what my grandmother's grandmother called it, in the old tongue. A remembering weapon." She turns to look at Bran. "It was forged as both weapon and penance. The ones who made it knew they had done a wrong thing, and they put that knowing into the steel." She pauses. "A weapon like that cannot be wielded by someone who does not understand what debt they carry. The blade will know the difference." Jon, riding on Bran's other side, listens to this without comment. "And its purpose," Bran says, "to kill the Night King." The old woman is quiet for a moment. When she speaks, her voice is careful and dry. "The Night King was a vessel," she says. "A vessel can be broken. What the weapon was made to break is not the vessel. It was made to break the thing the vessel was made to carry, the oath itself." She looks north, back toward the camp they have left. "Whether that can still be done, now that Arya's blade has already taken the vessel, I cannot tell you. That is a question for the ones who made it. And they are all dead." She does not say anything else for a long while. Bran watches the grey landscape move past and thinks about Oath and Vessel and the way the Weirwood vision showed him the Walker creation and then showed him nothing after, as if the net itself did not know what came next. Ghost stays 10 feet from the litter for the entire journey south. He does not come closer once. They reach Winterfell on the 4th day south, as the afternoon light is failing and the torches in the yard are being lit one by one against the coming dark. Sansa meets them at the gate. She looks at Jon the way she always looks at him now, with the particular relief of someone who has learned not to take the continued existence of the people she loves for granted. She grips his arm. He covers her hand with his. The old shaman and the younger man stand in the yard and look at the castle around them. Neither speaks. The old woman's eyes move across the newly bright stone of the east tower and then down to the dark ground beneath their feet, the way a person looks when they are listening rather than seeing. Sansa notices. She watches the old woman for a moment and then looks at Bran. "Tomorrow," Bran says. Sansa nods. "Tomorrow." In the morning they go down. Cotter leads the way with a torch, then Bran on a board carried between Jon and the younger shaman. Mira comes behind them, and the old woman last, moving through the crypts with a slowness that is not frailty, but attention, her hand trailing the stone walls as if reading them. They pass the long rows of dead Stark lords, with their iron swords and their stone wolves, past the known crypts and into the unlit passage below them, down to the seam in the wall, and the carved weirwood knotwork, and the faint bioluminescent glow bleeding through the stone before the door is even open. Jon stops in front of the sealed door and looks at it for a long moment. The runes, the handprint worn into the rock, the faint smell of something green and old that has no business being this far underground. He says nothing. He steps back and lets Bran cut his palm and press it to the stone. The door opens the same way it opened the first time, not quickly, not dramatically, but with the patient grinding of a mechanism that has been waiting 8,000 years and is in no hurry now that the wait is over. The light inside strengthens as the gap widens, pale red and white, the weirwood fungus threading the walls in living lines. Jon walks in ahead of the others. He stands in the center of the circular chamber and turns slowly, taking in the carved table and the map and the tablet and the empty center of the table where the blade used to rest before Sansa moved it upstairs. His jaw is tight. His eyes move the way they moved in Bran's telling, quickly, accounting. Then he crosses to the weirwood tablet and reads. He reads for a long time. The old shaman comes to stand beside him, close enough to see the text, and she reads alongside him in silence. Occasionally she touches a passage with one finger and says something in the old tongue to the younger man, who answers in kind. Jon does not interrupt them. When he finally straightens, his face has the look it gets when his mind has arrived somewhere it did not want to go and has decided to stand there anyway. "They built them to come back," he says, "not as punishment, as maintenance." Bran watches him. "Yes." Jon looks at the map on the table, the children's markings, the lines of significance, the cold lands marked in a different hand than the warm ones. He is quiet for a moment. Then, "And the blade breaks the mechanism, not the walker, the thing that keeps calling new walkers into being." "That is what the inscription says," Mira says, "and what the old woman told us on the road." Jon looks at the old shaman. She meets his gaze steadily. "My grandmother's people walked alongside the children in the last years," she says. "After the long night, after the wall, the ones who stayed behind told stories of what the children wept over, what they had done that could not be undone." She pauses. "They wept over the oath, not over the dead, over the oath." Bran reaches for the blade. Sansa brought it down this morning, before the descent, and it lies wrapped in its cloth at the table's edge. Bran unwraps it himself. The pale metal is unchanged, the weirwood veins moving in their slow amber pulse, light tracking through the blade as if it runs on something other than physics. He takes it in both hands and holds it and closes his eyes. The vision takes him hard. He is in the ancient war, and then he is beyond it, past the Night King's creation and into the space after. He sees the oath the way you see a road from above, not walking it, but understanding its shape, where it begins, where it was always intended to end. The children made the Night King to stop the first men, bound him to winter and to ice, and to their own blood promise that the world would always call him back when it had grown too full of heat and noise and human carelessness. They meant it as mercy, a correction built into the world's mechanics. What they did not understand, and what the tablet's translation tries to say in the careful, regretful, common speech of whoever transcribed it, is that the oath did not die with the Night King. It lived in the cold itself, in the old places between the stars where the children's magic found its roots, and it would keep finding vessels for as long as those roots held. Arya's blade took the vessel. The oath stood. Bran comes back to the chamber, with his hands shaking and his breath short and the blade still in his grip. No one speaks. They can see from his face that the vision was not a small one. He sets the blade down on the table. He looks at Jon. He tells them everything. Then, all of it, what he saw in the Godswood at Winterfell, what the visions have been showing him since the blade first touched his hands, the thing he held back from Sansa and Mira in the days after the chamber first opened. The oath persists. The vessel was Arya's to take. The oath belongs to something older than any of them have a name for. Using the blade correctly means finding a way to offer the oath something, a new agreement, a willing intermediary, a voice that can speak to the roots of the children's magic and negotiate a release. Someone who carries enough of the right blood to be heard, enough understanding of the debt to be trusted, and enough willingness to stand in the space between the world and the cold without flinching. The old shaman listens to all of this without surprise. When Bran finishes, she says quietly that in the songs, this person is not called a wielder. They are called the respondent, the one who answers on behalf of the living. The younger man speaks for the first time since they entered the chamber. His voice is low and careful. In the oldest version of the song, he says, the respondent does not come back. The silence that follows is the particular kind that no one rushes to fill. Jon is looking at the blade. He is not looking at Bran. That is when the door opens behind them. Sansa comes through first, with Lyanna Mormont 2 steps behind her and 2 guards at the threshold who stop there, unwilling to come farther in. Sansa takes in the room, the blade on the table, Bran's shaking hands, Jon's face. She has clearly been moving quickly. Her jaw is set in the way that means she already knows she is going to be told she should not have come. Lyanna looks at the tablet on the table, and then at the assembled faces, and arrives at her own accounting of the situation with the speed of someone who has been reading rooms since before she had power to change them. "Whatever you are deciding," Sansa says, "you are not deciding it without me." No one argues. There is no version of this room with this knowledge in it where arguing that point serves any purpose. But the blade lies between them on the old stone table, and the old shaman's words hang in the chamber air, and no one yet knows what answering the oath will cost, or who is willing to pay it. Bran looks at his brother. Jon is still looking at the blade. Sansa looks at the blade for a long moment and then looks away from it. That is the only sign she gives that it frightens her. When she speaks, her voice is even. "Then we need the lords," she says. "All of them. Tonight." Jon finally pulls his eyes from the table. He looks at his sister and nods once, and that is the end of the discussion about whether to call the council. They convene in the great hall 2 hours later, torches lit along every bracket, the long tables rearranged so the northern lords sit facing the high seat rather than one another. Sansa stands rather than sitting. Jon and Bran are to her left, Mira behind them, the 2 shamans at the far end of the room near the door, watching. Lyanna Mormont takes her place among the lords with her arms crossed and her face giving nothing away, which means she has already decided what she thinks and is waiting for the rest of the room to catch up. The lords are 7 in number, representatives from Manderley, Glover, Hornwood, Serwyn, Tallheart, Flint, and a younger Umber cousin who holds what remains of Last Hearth. They have ridden in or were already at Winterfell for the Northern Reconstruction Council that Sansa called 3 weeks ago. They are not expecting what they get. Sansa tells them everything. She lays it out without softening it. The chamber, the tablet, the blade, the children's shame, what the inscription means, what Bran's visions have shown, what the shamans called the respondent. She tells them the Long Night may have taken the vessel and left the oath standing. She does not tell them who she thinks must answer it. That part she does not yet know herself. The hall is quiet when she finishes. Then Lord Glover pushes back his chair. "Burn it," he says. "Whatever it is, seal the chamber again and burn the blade and be done." "You cannot burn something you do not understand," Mira says from behind Bran's chair, and her voice is flat and factual rather than heated. "We do not know what burning it would do." Better to risk burning it than to sit on it waiting for the cold to come back, Glover says. The Umber cousin speaks next. He is young, 20, maybe less, and his voice has not fully settled into itself, but what he says is not foolish. If the Night King came once, and Arya Stark's blade could only take the vessel, then we want whatever blade can take the thing behind the vessel. We don't throw that away. Lyanna speaks without preamble. The North prepares for war, quietly, without announcement, but we begin. Whatever this costs to resolve, we cannot arrive at it unprepared. If a new vessel forms, and we are sitting with our gates open and our grain unstored, we deserve what follows. Several of the lords nod at this. Several do not. Jon waits until the room has run through its first wave of reaction, and then he speaks. His voice carries the particular quality it always carries in rooms like this, not loud, but reaching every corner without effort. Destroying the blade may not be possible, he says. We do not know how it was made or what unmakes it, and even if we could destroy it, that does not break the oath. The shamans have made that clear. He pauses. What I know is that this cannot stay only in this room. I am the Night's Watch, what remains of it. Bran is king of the Six Kingdoms. If the threat is real and we have kept it from the realm and the cold comes back, there is no version of that where Winterfell survives the aftermath. Not politically, not in any other way. There is a long silence. Bran speaks into it. Ravens go south, he says. King's Landing, the Vale, the Reach. I request an urgent council with the small council and ask Tyrion to come north to examine the evidence himself before any response is committed to. He will want to see this before he advises anyone on what to do. He looks around the room. We say nothing of the blade's purpose in the Ravens. We say only that there is information bearing on the long night that requires immediate counsel. Sansa watches the lords. The Manderley man is whispering to the Flint representative. Glover still has his jaw set, but he has stopped arguing. Lyanna is already looking at the door, thinking past the council to what comes after it. In the end, the decision carries. The Ravens go out before midnight. The coded message that reaches King's Landing takes 3 days. Tyrion reads it twice in the early morning, alone in his chambers with the candle burning low, and then he sits with it for a long while before he calls anyone. He summons Davos first, because Davos has both the discretion and the northern knowledge to be useful, and because Tyrion trusts him in the specific way you trust someone who has no ambition left to make them unreliable. He lays the letter on the table between them and watches Davos read it. Davos reads slowly and carefully, the way a man reads who taught himself the letters late and has never stopped being grateful for them. When he finishes, he looks up. You're going north, he says. I am going north, Tyrion confirms. The evidence needs eyes before anyone advises Bran how to respond. If I send counsel based on a coded letter and the counsel is wrong, the consequences are not the kind you survive professionally. He pauses. Or otherwise. Davos nods. He does not argue. He asks about the party and the timing, and whether Tyrion intends to inform the full small council before departing. Tyrion does not. He leaves written instructions framing the journey as a routine inspection of northern reconstruction, accurate enough that no one will question it, vague enough that no one will know what they are not being told. By the following morning they are riding north with 4 guards and a Maester's satchel that contains, among other things, every text on Children of the Forest magic that the Red Keep's library holds, which is not many. Back at Winterfell, in the hours after the council, the shamans go down into the crypts. Sansa brings the blade from her chest and carries it herself, and Bran goes with her and the old woman and the younger man into the sealed chamber. The shamans ask for privacy for the ritual itself, and Bran stays outside the door, seated in the passage, and listens. What he hears through the stone is not words. It is sound in a rhythm older than common speech, a layered pattern of tones that the 2 voices produce in alternating register, the old woman's low and steady, the younger man's moving through variations above her. It goes on for a long time. Bran closes his eyes and does not try to enter the Greenseer's reach. He simply listens. The way you listen to something when listening itself is the point. When the shamans emerge, the old woman looks wrung out. The younger man sits down on the passage floor without ceremony and puts his back against the wall and breathes. They rest for a while before either speaks. The old woman tells Bran what they have done. A binding circle, she says, weirwood sap traced around the weapon in the old pattern, the one her grandmother's people used to quiet things that were awake when they should not be. It will not hold indefinitely, but it will keep the blade from sending out what she calls its reach, the awareness it projects into the cold that tells the deep places of the world the weapon exists and where it is. How long? Bran asks. She considers. Months, not years. He nods. That is enough time for Tyrion to arrive, enough time to decide. The younger man speaks from the floor, not looking up, his voice quiet and tired. It knows, he says. When I had my hands near it, I could feel it knowing, the way you feel a fire in a room before you see it. He pauses. It knows why it was made. It knows it has not done what it was made to do. He looks up at Bran then, and his eyes in the torchlight are dark and steady. It hungers for it. Bran sits with that for a moment. Then he wheels himself back toward the upper crypts, toward the light. Tyrion arrives on a gray morning 9 days after the ravens go south, riding through Winterfell's gates with Davos at his side, and 4 guards trailing behind them, all of them dusted with road, and looking like they have not slept sufficiently since King's Landing. Tyrion does not wait for ceremony. He dismounts, hands his reins to a stable boy, and looks at the castle the way he looks at everything, quickly, with the part of his mind that cannot help cataloging what it sees. The bright stone of the East Tower catches his eye. He files it without comment. Sansa meets him in the yard. They have not stood in the same space since before the Red Wedding, and the fact of everything that has happened between that moment and this one sits between them as they look at each other. She greets him with the courtesy she extends to people she is not yet sure of and does not intend to be careless with. He receives it without pretense. "You came quickly," she says. "Your raven was careful," he says. "Careful ravens worry me more than urgent ones." She nods and leads him inside. They go down into the crypts that same afternoon. Sansa carries the blade herself, wrapped in its cloth, and Tyrion walks beside Bran's board with a candle in one hand and the posture of a man conserving his reactions for when they will be most useful. Jon is already below, having gone down ahead of the party. The shamans stay above at Sansa's request. They have said what they came to say, and a crowded chamber serves no one. When Tyrion steps through the sealed door and into the circular room, he stops. He takes in the weirwood threading the walls, the bioluminescent glow, the stone table and its carved map. He walks to the map first. He traces the children's markings with one finger without touching them, reads the place sigils, follows the lines of significance from the cold north down to the rivers and the coast. Then he goes to the tablet. He reads for a long time. Jon stands near the wall and watches him. Mira sits on the floor near the door with her back against the stone. Bran is still, hands in his lap, waiting with the patience he has developed since becoming whatever he now is, patient in the way deep water is patient. Not because nothing moves in it, but because the movement is not visible from outside. Tyrion finishes the tablet, goes back to the beginning, and reads a second time. Then he straightens and is quiet for a moment, and when he speaks, his voice is measured and flat in the way it gets when he is delivering conclusions he wishes he had arrived at differently. "The binding is older than the wall," he says, "older than the compact. The Night King was not made as a weapon and released, he was made as an instrument of a mechanism, and the mechanism is the oath, and the oath is still running." He pauses. "Arya killed the man with the ice. She did not kill the contract." No one disputes this. It is what they already know, but hearing it from Tyrion, who reads everything and dismisses nothing without evidence, closes the last door on the possibility that they have misread the tablet. He walks back to the map and studies the cold north markings again. He asks Bran 3 questions about the Green Seer visions. What the children's emotional register was when the oath was made, whether the vision showed a spoken word or a blood act as the binding mechanism, and whether Bran saw any indication of a release condition written into the original terms. Bran answers all 3, and Tyrion is quiet for a while after that, working. His conclusion, when it comes, is what Sansa has feared since the chamber first opened. The blade could break the mechanism. The inscription is not decorative. The children made it specifically to do what they could not do themselves. But the tablet's conditional language in its final passage describes a required intermediary, someone who enters the negotiation on behalf of the living, and the phrasing around the intermediary's fate is not hopeful, it is careful. Which is worse? The question of whether any children remain to treat with is another problem entirely. Tyrion says this with the directness of a man who sees no purpose in delaying hard facts. If the children are gone, Jon says, who does the respondent speak to? Tyrion looks at him. The roots, he says. Whatever the children built the oath into, the magic does not require the makers to still be present. Oaths rarely do. Jon takes this in. He turns it over the way he turns difficult things over, looking at all its faces before he decides what to do with it. It is Davos who speaks next, from his place near the door. He has been quiet through all of it, listening, which is what Davos does best. When he speaks, his voice is unhurried. Stannis believed in prophecy, he says. He believed it the way a drowning man believes in the plank he's grabbed hold of, past reason, past evidence, and it destroyed him. It destroyed everyone around him. He looks at the blade on the table, then back at the room. Before we decide what the respondent must do and who must do it, I'd want to know how certain we are that the threat is real. Not how certain the tablet says we should be, how certain we actually are. The room is quiet. It is not a foolish question. It is in fact the question that none of them have wanted to ask directly, because asking it requires sitting with the possibility that they have built a crisis from old words in a sealed room and the frightened interpretation of dreams. Tyrion looks at the younger shaman, who has appeared in the doorway behind Davos. He came down, after all, quietly, without announcement. The younger man meets Tyrion's gaze and then looks at the blade. The binding ritual suppressed its reach, he says. Before we performed it, I could feel the cold moving toward it. Not close, but moving. He pauses. Something out in the dark already knows the vessel is gone. Davos nods slowly. He does not look satisfied, but he looks like a man who has asked the question he needed to ask and received the answer he feared. That is something. Tyrion looks at Sansa. The decision about what to do cannot be his. She is queen in the north, and this is northern ground, and the blade is in her chest with her key around her neck. He can counsel. He cannot choose. Both paths must be pursued, she says. It is the first time she has spoken since they came below. Her voice in the chamber is steady and quiet. Bran attempts to contact any remaining children through the weirwood net. We prepare the north as if the threat is certain, because we cannot afford to be wrong in that direction. And nothing leaves this room regarding the respondent until we know more. That word does not travel south. Not yet. Bran agrees. Jon nods. Tyrion does not argue. Davos looks at the blade one more time and then looks away from it, with the deliberate intention of a man choosing where to put his attention. They go up. The sealed door closes behind them. That night, Tyrion sits alone in the chamber he has been given and works through his citadel notes by candlelight, every fragment on children's magic, every secondary source he has read that touched on First Men pacts and blood agreements. There is not much. There never was. He works until the candle burns low, and then he sits in the near-dark thinking, which he is also good at, and which he is not enjoying. Somewhere below him, beneath the castle's old bones and the hot spring warmth and the long rows of iron-sworded dead, the blade sits in its weirwood circle. Waiting, the way the younger shaman said it, waits, knowing what it was made for, knowing it has not done it yet. The godswood is quiet in the way it is only ever quiet before dawn, when even the ravens have not yet started, and the hot spring mist sits low over the black pool. Bran wheels himself in alone. He asked for that. Sansa did not argue, which means she understood that what he is about to attempt cannot be watched without changing it. He positions himself before the heart tree and looks up at the carved face for a moment. Then he closes his eyes. The weirwood net opens beneath him like deep water. He has done this before. Touched the roots, moved through the linked consciousness of every heart tree the first men planted across the north. But those were directed searches, specific threads he pulled towards specific memories. What he does now is different. He releases the direction entirely. He spreads himself thin across the whole net and simply listens, the way you listen for a sound at the edge of hearing, and waits for something to answer. Last Hearth's tree comes first. It is old and wounded, its memories fractured from the years the castle sat empty and the fire that preceded that. Barroton's tree is older still, quieter, its memories sedimented in long, unbroken layers going down and down through centuries of winters. He moves through both without finding what he is looking for and keeps moving, deeper, touching the trees that stand beyond the wall in the true north, the ancient ones that grew before men named them, their bark black and their roots sunk into ground that has been frozen since before the compact. The presence finds him before he finds it. It comes from below, not from any single tree, but from the root space between them, the dark earth channel where the weirwood systems connect. It is faint in the way a lamp is faint seen from a very great distance, small but unmistakably deliberate. It knows he is there. It has been waiting in the particular way of a thing that has been waiting a very long time and has learned to be patient about it. Bran moves toward it carefully. He sends the images the way he has learned to send things through the net, not as words, which do not travel well here, but as understood shapes. The chamber, the sealed door, the map on the stone table, the blade. He holds each one clearly and releases it into the root space between them and waits. What comes back is not language. It is feeling, compressed and dense the way old wood is dense, carrying more weight than its size suggests. He sorts through it slowly. Sorrow is the first and largest layer, an old sorrow, not raw but deep-grained, the kind that has been lived with so long it has become structural. Beneath that, resignation, and beneath that something that surprises him. Hope. Not the hopeful hopefulness of youth, the aching, half-afraid hope of something that has been without it for a very long time and does not entirely trust that it is real. He sends back acknowledgement. He sends the question, "Will you speak with us? Will you receive a delegation?" The response takes longer this time. When it comes, it carries with it a location, not a name or a landmark, but a feeling of place, a cold, deep stone sensation tied to specific weirwood roots far north and far below. And with it, a condition he reads as clearly as words. The green seer must come, not a proxy, not a letter through the roots. The green seer himself, in his body, in that place. Then the presence recedes, not gone, but dormant again, and the net goes quiet. And Bran is sitting before the heart tree, in the godswood, with the dawn just beginning to gray the sky above the walls. He stays there a while longer, breathing. When he goes inside, they are already gathered in the great hall, Jon, Sansa, Meera, Tyrion, Davos. Someone has brought bread and salt fish and a pot of tea that has gone cold. None of them have slept much. They look at him when he comes in and he tells them what he found and what it asked for, and the room goes through its response the way it always does. Sansa forbids it first, Jon volunteers second, and Bran declines Jon before Jon has fully finished the offer. "She will only speak to a green seer," he says. "That is what the condition means. Jon cannot stand in for that." "Then we bring the weirwood to her," Tyrion says. "Can you communicate through the roots at greater depth? Extend the conversation from this end rather than traveling to that end?" "I tried," Bran says. "She will not. She has been waiting for someone to come in person. I think she has been waiting a long time." Tyrion absorbs this without visibly liking it. He looks at the cold tea, decides against it, looks back up. Sansa is standing with her arms at her sides, and the particular stillness she holds when she has already worked through the argument and arrived somewhere she does not want to be. Winterfell cannot be left without. Sansa leads from Winterfell, Bran says. That has always been the arrangement. This changes nothing about that. She looks at him. He meets it steadily, and after a moment, she turns away from it, which is not the same as conceding, but is the closest she will come right now. Meera says she is going. She says it without inflection, the way she says most things, and nobody argues. Tyrion's offer to join the delegation is unexpected. He frames it practically. The child's terms, whatever they are, will require negotiation, and someone needs to be there who can hold competing conditions in their head simultaneously and find a path between them. There is no false modesty in it. He is right, and everyone in the room knows it. Davos does not push to go. He offers instead to remain with Sansa, to serve as the link between Winterfell's council and whatever the delegation learns in the north. Sansa accepts this without negotiating, which means she is grateful for it. Lyanna Mormont sends 4 northern scouts from the garrison, experienced men, 2 of whom have been ranging beyond the wall since before the long night. She does not offer to go herself because she is 16 years old and smarter than to mistake eagerness for usefulness in a situation this specific. They spend the next 2 days in preparation. Tyrion consolidates his citadel notes and adds to them a written account of everything the tablet says about the pack's conditional language, his own translation checked against Bran's. Mira repacks the ranging gear she has kept sorted and ready out of a habit she never dropped after the years beyond the wall. Jon checks the scouts' equipment personally and does not say much about it, which means he is working through something he is not ready to speak aloud yet. The old shaman confirms the binding ritual on the blade holds. She performs a second check on it the evening before they depart, going below alone and returning with the same answer. Months, still. The younger man helps her up the crypt stairs when she comes back, his hand under her elbow, and she permits it, which tells Bran she is more tired than she shows. The blade stays in Sansa's chest. Bran says this plainly on the final evening, and no one debates it. Whatever the child of the forest asks them to bring, it will not be that, not yet, not before they understand the terms. Sansa locks the chest and keeps the key, and does not say what she does not need to say, which is that the key does not leave her neck for any reason until they return. The party rides out the following morning in the gray early cold, 7 riders total. Bran in his chair fixed to a specially rigged cart the carpenters built for the northern ranges, Mira beside him, Jon ahead, Tyrion riding with his satchel of notes across the saddle, Davos standing at the gate watching until they have passed out of sight. The wall is 3 days north. What lies beyond it is further than that. Bran keeps his mind closed as they ride, conserving what the trance has cost him. He does not reach into the weirwood net again. He simply rides north and watches the land go gray and then white around them, and thinks about hope, the ancient, structural, half-afraid kind, and what it means that something has been waiting this long to give it. The wall is 3 days north of Winterfell, and the lands of Always Winter are 3 days beyond that, and by the time the delegation passes through the gate at Castle Black, the cold has become a different kind of cold, not the ordinary northern cold that bites and retreats, but the deep cold that presses, that has weight to it, that makes the horses short and unhappy and reluctant to face forward. Castle Black's garrison is thin. A handful of men, mostly former wildlings who stayed when the free folk came south, tend the structure with the minimal attention of people who understand they are caretakers of something the world has decided it no longer needs. They give the delegation fresh horses and dried meat and do not ask questions about where they are going. Rangers learn early not to ask that. Beyond the wall, the land changes immediately. The trees thin and then stop. The snow is older here, compressed and blue-white, creaking underfoot. The 4 northern scouts fan out ahead of the cart without being told, reading the ground the way men do when the ground cannot be trusted. They lose the first scout on the second day past the wall. He goes ahead around a frozen outcrop to check a crevasse the youngest shaman marked on their route chart, and when they follow his tracks to the edge, there is nothing below but darkness and, far down, the faint sound of water moving under ice. His name was Harwick. He had 2 daughters in Barrowton. The remaining 3 scouts pull back from the edge and nobody speaks for a moment, and then the column moves on, because there is nothing else to do. Tyrion rides quietly after that. He has stopped making observations aloud and started writing them instead, his satchel open across the saddle, his handwriting cramped and quick against the cold. Jon watches the horizon. Mira stays close to Bran's cart, her hand on the side rail when the ground is rough. The free folk shamans travel lighter than everyone else and move faster on foot than seems reasonable. The old woman does not ride. She walks ahead of the cart with a staff and a wrapped bundle of dried herbs she burns in small amounts at intervals, scattering the ash into the wind with a practiced gesture that suggests it is practical rather than ceremonial. The younger man stays near her. He has not spoken much since they passed the wall. When Jon asks him what the herbs are for, he thinks for a moment and then says, "To tell the land we mean it no harm." Jon does not ask what the land would do if it thought otherwise. By the 3rd day beyond the wall, the shamans begin to slow. The old woman stops more frequently, pressing her palm flat against the snow and then lifting it and looking at what the impression leaves. She does not share what she reads in it, but she alters the route twice, taking the column south of an open plain and then northeast through a frozen ravine, where the walls close in to 20 feet on either side, and the ice above them groans with the particular sound of something bearing more weight than it wants to. Bran keeps his mind closed. He has not reached into the weirwood net since they departed Winterfell. He wants to arrive with his full capacity intact, not spent from traveling through it. So he watches the land instead, which he has not done in a long time. Not through roots or memory or the eyes of birds, but simply with his own eyes, sitting in his chair on the cart, watching the frozen world go past. It is watching him back. He has been certain of this since the first day. Not malevolently, more the way a sleeping animal is aware of something moving near it, its attention present without its eyes opening. The land is conscious of their passage in a way that ordinary ground is not, and the blade's absence from the party makes no difference to it. Whatever they disturbed by opening the chamber has already disturbed something here, and the disturbance is spreading in the slow, tectonic way of old magic, barely perceptible and completely unstoppable. He does not tell the others. There is nothing actionable in it. The cave entrance appears on the morning of the 4th day past the wall. At the base of a mountain the shamans have been navigating toward since yesterday without naming it. It is vast, 30 feet wide at minimum, the stone above it overhanging like a brow, and from inside comes a faint warm light that has no business being there in the dead of the lands of always winter. Bioluminescent. Pale red-white, the same color as the chamber beneath Winterfell. The weirwood's color, wherever it runs deep enough and long enough. The scouts stay outside with the horses. The old shaman says this without sentiment, and the scouts accept it with the relief of men who have been hoping someone would give them that instruction. The 6 of them go in: Bran, Jon, Mira, Tyrion, and the 2 shamans. The passage is wide enough for the chair, but only just, and Mira guides it with careful hands, watching the floor. Tyrion carries a candle that is immediately irrelevant. The bioluminescence is sufficient, stronger than it looked from outside, pulsing at intervals too slow to be called flickering. The walls are carved. Not everywhere, patches of raw stone between, where the carvers stopped or were interrupted, but where the carvings are, they run floor to ceiling, interlocking patterns of weirwood roots and handprints and figures that are neither entirely human nor entirely something else, caught in postures of grief or ceremony or both. Tyrion traces one panel with his eyes without touching it. He looks at Bran. Bran looks at the panel and nods. "Children," he says. This was a home. They go deeper. The passage opens into chambers, each one larger than the last, and the evidence of habitation the outline described is present and more affecting in person than Bran expected. Stone vessels still containing residue, sleeping hollows worn smooth by bodies that stopped sleeping in them an unknowable number of years ago, walls covered in a continuity of carvings that represents a history longer than any written record in any citadel library. Tyrion stands before one wall for a long moment, his candle still lit out of habit, and then he continues walking. The deepest chamber is warm, not comfortably warm, unnervingly warm, as if something below the stone is generating heat, which something is. The weirwood roots here are thick as a man's torso, running through the walls and floor and ceiling in dense interlocking cables, and where they cluster most thickly, there is a heat that radiates without burning, steady and old. She is at the chamber's center. The last child of the forest is small, the way all children are small, and her face carries an age that does not read as human age, not lined or worn, but deep in the way of something that has existed past the point where existence is a question. She is rooted. The weirwood tendrils have grown through her over what must be centuries, emerging from her shoulders and arms and the backs of her hands, stitching her to the ground. She is not in pain. That much is clear. She is sustained by the roots the way a graft is sustained by its host, fed and kept and held. Her eyes are open, green, with the inner light the children's eyes carry. They move to Bran's face. He reaches into the weirwood net. She meets him there. And the sorrow is the first thing, enormous and immediate, followed by the resignation. And then, underneath both of them, the hope he felt from Winterfell, closer now, more real, but also more frightened for being close to the thing it has been hoping for. She does not speak aloud. She speaks the way the weirwood speaks, in images and certainty, and Bran translates aloud for the others in a voice that does not sound entirely like his own. She confirms the pact, he says. The blood pact. The walkers are bound to return. It is written into the land's memory, not any single creature. Arya ended a vessel. The cold is already searching for a new one. He stops, listens. She says the blade can end it. She says the word for the respondent in the oldest tongue means the one who stands between, not a sacrifice, an intermediary. But she says the intermediary does not leave the negotiation unchanged. He pauses longer this time. She cannot tell us what changed means. She has never seen a successful negotiation. She has only seen what the pact cost when there was no one to stand in it. Jon looks at Bran. Bran's eyes are unfocused, still partly in the net. Ask her, Jon says quietly. if there is another way? Bran asks. The answer comes back in the image of roots growing through stone, not violent, not forced, but inevitable, the way water finds its level, patient, final. No, Bran says. Nobody moves for a long moment after that. The child's eyes stay on Bran's face. The weirwood roots pulse their pale red warmth. Then Jon turns and walks to the far wall of the chamber and stands there with his back to the room, and nobody speaks to him about it. Tyrion breaks the silence first, which is what Tyrion does. "Changed how?" he says. Not a question, more the sound of a mind refusing to accept an incomplete answer. There must be precedent. There must be something in the roots she can show you. Bran reaches back toward the net. The child is still present, waiting with her particular patient attention. He sends the shape of Tyrion's demand, not the words, but the want behind them, the need for more precise information, and what comes back is the image he received before. Roots through stone. Inevitable. And beneath it something new. A secondary image he did not catch the first time, or she did not offer it then. A pool of still water. A face reflected in it, looking up. The face is the same face, but the eyes are different. He cannot read what different means. He is not sure the difference is something human language holds. She has seen it begin, he says slowly. A respondent who accepted the role in the age before the compact. She does not know what happened to them after because they did not return to her. She only knows they walked in under the roots, and the land accepted the negotiation and the cold receded. For a time. For a time, Jon says from the wall. He has not turned around. The long night was not the first one, Bran says. That is what she means. Jon turns then. His face is gray in the weirwood light. How long between them? Bran asks. The answer comes back as feeling rather than number, long enough that the memory of cold had faded from the living, short enough that the roots still held the shape of what was lost. Bran tells them this in those terms because there is no better way to say it, and Tyrion writes it down without editorializing, which is its own kind of response. The old shaman has been still since they entered the inner chamber, standing at the edge of the root warmth with her hands folded and her eyes on the child. Now she speaks in the free folk tongue, and the younger man translates without being asked. She says the last respondent was not a greenseer. She says a greenseer would be stronger. She says this is what the oldest songs meant when they said the Thawbringer would come from the south with roots in their blood. Jon looks at Bran. Bran meets it. I know, Bran says. Then say it. It should be me. He says it plainly. The blade requires a wielder who understands the debt. The respondent must stand between the cold and the pact. I am already between things. I have been since the cave. Mira makes a sound that is not quite an objection and not quite agreement, just acknowledgement that the logic exists and she does not like it. Tyrion sets down his quill. If you go in and do not come back, the 6 kingdoms have no king. The political map you described as final becomes anything but final. The political map will not matter much in the next long night. We do not know when the next long night comes. She does not know either, Bran says. But the cold is searching. The binding ritual holds the blade for months, not years. Whatever is going to happen needs to happen in that window. The child watches all of this. Bran is aware of her attention the way you are aware of deep water beneath a frozen surface. Present, still, patient. He sends her the question that has been forming since he first felt her hope in the weirwood net at Winterfell. What does she want from this? Not what does the magic require. What does she, the last one, want? The answer is the most human thing she has sent. She wants it to stop. She has watched every long night from this cave for 8,000 years, fed by roots, kept alive by the sap of something she helped build, and she wants the cycle to end. Not delayed, not negotiated into a longer pause. Ended. She thinks the blade can do that if the respondent is strong enough. She does not know if any respondent has ever been strong enough, she hopes. Bran closes his eyes. When he opens them, the room is waiting. We go back, he says. We bring the blade. We come back here and we do this properly, with the council informed and a plan in place for what happens to the north and the 6 kingdoms if I come out changed in ways that prevent me from governing. He looks at Tyrion. That is your problem to solve between now and our return. Tyrion absorbs this. Workable, he says, which from Tyrion means he has already started. Jon does not argue. He asks one thing. Does the child need anything from them before they go? Any sign of commitment? Any gesture the old ways required? Bran asks. She sends back the image of his bloodied palm from the sealed door beneath Winterfell, and then the image of the weirwood table with the blade laid on it, and the understanding that the commitment is already made, was made when the door opened. She has been waiting 8,000 years. She can wait for the blade. They leave the inner chamber in the same order they entered. The carved walls of the passage look different on the way out, or Tyrion is looking at them differently. He pauses twice to trace the lines of figures with his eyes, and Bran lets him, because they have time and because those carvings are the only record that the respondent before the compact existed at all. Outside, the cold hits like a wall after the root warmth. The 3 remaining scouts have the horses ready and do not ask questions. The younger shaman takes his position at the front of the column. The old woman falls into step beside Bran's cart and does not look at him for a long time. Then she says, in accented common, "She showed you the pool." Bran looks at her. "Yes." She nods once. "The face in the water is still yours," she says. "Whatever changes, that part holds." Then she walks ahead and does not say more about it, and Bran is not sure if she means it as reassurance or as warning or if she knows the difference. The ride south to the wall takes 3 days, the same as the ride north. Harwick's absence from the column is a presence of its own kind, a gap in the formation the remaining scouts do not fill, leaving his position open by unspoken agreement. Nobody suggests collapsing the ranks. Tyrion writes for most of the return journey. By the time Castle Black appears, he has a draft framework, a governance continuity arrangement, northern and southern provisions, language calibrated to the political sensitivities of a council that does not yet know what they are agreeing to prepare for. He reads the core provisions to Bran on the second evening, camped in the shelter of a frozen ridge with the wall visible to the south and the stars very bright above them. Bran listens. He suggests 2 changes. Tyrion makes them without comment. Jon rides near the back of the column most of the way south. He does not say much to anyone until the last night, when he sits down beside Bran's chair near the fire and they are quiet together for a while. "She said it is not a death sentence," Jon says eventually. "She said she does not know," Bran says. "Those are different things." Jon looks at the fire. "I know." A pause. "You are still sure?" Bran considers it properly, which it deserves. The old woman's words about the face in the pool, the child's desperate, ancient hope, the blade waiting in Sansa's chest in Winterfell with the binding ritual counting down. "Yes," he says. Jon nods. Somewhere behind them, Ghost moves in the dark, his white coat catching the firelight, and then he is still again. They are back at Winterfell before the first moon of their absence has set. Sansa meets them at the gate with Davos at her shoulder and reads the answer in Bran's face before anyone speaks. She leads them inside. The blade is retrieved from her chest and placed on the table in her private chambers, still wrapped, the binding ritual's weirwood circle faintly visible at its base. Tyrion presents his governance framework that evening, reading from his draft by firelight while the assembled faces listen without interrupting. When he finishes, there is a long quiet. "I accept it," Bran says. Sansa looks at the blade, then she looks at her brother. "When?" she says. "When the binding weakens, the old woman will tell us." After that, the waiting begins. 6 months pass in the way that months pass when you are watching a horizon for something you cannot name, slowly and then too quickly, with a quality of unreality that makes ordinary events feel like borrowed time. The wall is reinforced. Additional garrisons ride north from the gift under cover of the Night's Watch's restoration, a project Tyrion quietly funds through a crown rerouting he describes in official correspondence as infrastructure repair. Dragonstone is reoccupied by a rotating crew of Citadel scholars and Lyseni glassworkers, its dragonglass stores catalogued and divided between northern and southern stockpiles. The Reach establishes training grounds at Horn Hill, where warriors learn the properties of obsidian without being told precisely why. Word spreads anyway. It always does. Not the blade, not the respondent, not the sealed chamber, but the shape of the thing, the feeling of it, moving from lord to lord in the way rumors move when the people passing them do not know enough to be specific. The threat has not ended. The North knows something. Whispers travel south faster than ravens. Some lords hoard obsidian weapons and dragonglass arrowheads and lock their granaries. Others dismiss the whole business as northern superstition dressed in the authority of a greenseer king, a convenient excuse for stark dominance to persist past the long night that gave it meaning. 2 Reach Lords send formal letters to Tyrion requesting clarification. He writes back with warmth and says nothing actionable. The political fractures are real but manageable. What is less manageable is the quiet. The weirwood net is quieter than it should be. Bran monitors it through the godswood every 3rd day, sinking into the roots with the careful attention of a man checking a wound for infection. And what he finds is the stillness the child described, the cold in the far north, patient, present, not yet organized around a new vessel, but searching the way cold searches, the way water searches, finding every crack. Something is moving at the edges of the network that was not moving 2 months ago. He tells Mira. He does not tell Sansa. Mira takes the information and uses it. She has been building the order of Watchers since their return, selecting from the North's fighters with a discernment born of years beside the 3-eyed raven, men and women who can move through the cold without noise, who understand silence as a skill rather than an absence, who can be trusted with a half-truth and will not demand the whole. There are 11 of them by the 4th month. By the 6th, there are 19, stationed in a chain from the wall south to Winterfell, each one charged with monitoring 3 things: the behavior of wildlife moving south, the behavior of weirwood saplings near the wall, and their own dreams. Mira does not explain the last instruction. They follow it anyway. Sansa's order is more formal. She calls it the Keepers of the Deep, and the ceremony is held in the sealed chamber itself, lit by the same pale bioluminescence that lit the night of discovery. 7 Northerners take the oath, 3 of them women, which no one remarks on, because Sansa does not establish things that invite comment. They are sworn to the crypts, the chamber, the tablet, and the blade. The oath is long and specific, written in Sansa's own hand with counsel from the old tongue fragments Bran translated. It names the debt. It names the cycle. It names the consequence of failure without specifying when failure would come. Word of the order reaches the south within weeks. The southern lords receive it as they receive most things from the north, with a combination of unease and distance that has been the political texture of the realm since the secession. Trade slows at the neck. 2 merchant families in White Harbor relocate their primary operations south. The distrust is real. So is the isolation, and Bran lets it happen, because isolation is what the north needs now, and distrust from the south is a smaller problem than the one moving at the edges of the weirwood net. At the end of the 6th month, Bran goes to the godswood at dusk, alone. He rolls his chair to the heart tree and rests his hand against its bark, feeling the warmth of it even in the autumn cold. The red leaves hang still. The carved face in the pale wood is the same face it has always been, patient and ancient and indifferent to cold in the way of things that remember older colds. He closes his eyes and descends into the roots. The net spreads wide and quiet. He moves through it without urgency, without looking directly at any single point, letting the whole network come to him rather than reaching into it. The stumps north of the wall where weirwoods were cut before the compact. The roots beneath the lands of always winter, warm and vast and faintly pulsing. The child is still there, still waiting. And beyond her, in the deep cold, the searching continues, slow, patient, entirely without frustration, because the cold does not experience frustration. It has time. It has always had time. But it has not found its vessel. The binding holds. The oath without a host is like water in its searching phase, spreading through cracks, not yet gathered into force. He opens his eyes. The godswood is dim around him, the last daylight gone behind the wall. Ghost stands at the edge of the trees, white against the dark, watching north with his ears forward and his breath steady. He has been there since Bran arrived. He does not come closer, but he does not leave. Bran looks north, through the trees, through the wall, through the distance and the dark, toward the wall's pale mass and the ancient cold beyond it, and the child waiting in her warm cave with her roots and her hope and her 8,000-year vigil. He understands now what Winterfell has always been, not a seat of power, not a great house's inheritance, a post, the oldest post in the world, set by a man who understood what was coming and built everything he knew how to build in service of holding it. The kings and the banners and the words, "Winter is coming," not a motto. A watch cry. A reminder passed from air to air until the meaning faded and only the sound remained. the cycle will turn again. Bran does not know when. The child does not know when. The land knows only that it will. And when it does, Winterfell will be here. The blade will be here. The keepers will be here. The watchers in their chain from the wall south. And whatever he becomes when he stands between the cold and the oath will be here too, changed or unchanged, for as long as it holds. He stays until the stars are fully out. Then he turns his chair south, toward the lit windows of the castle, and goes inside. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the 7 kingdoms and beyond, then please like, share, and subscribe.